It was just a long, drawn out 3 years that I had to go through dealing with the NCAA.
Lester Earl, born September 26, 1976. Lester Earl's story isn't just about another high school phenom who didn't live up to the hype. It's about a system that promised everything but gave nothing in return. A story where the spotlight was blinding from the start, but when the lights dimmed, the world had already moved on. At 6'8" with freakish athleticism and a natural ability to dominate above the rim, Lester Earl was supposed to be LSU's next great player. Shaq had left and Stanley Roberts before him, but the blueprint was clear. Earl would be the one to carry the torch and bring LSU back to national relevance. But sometimes, no matter how clear the path looks, life has a way of pulling you off course. For Lester Earl, that detour started early. An injured knee, friction with a legendary coach, and the pressure that comes with being a highly recruited athlete in a program desperate to stay relevant. By the time he transferred to Kansas, the shine had already worn off. Once viewed as a future NBA star, Earl became a role player on a loaded Jayhawk squad, and after going undrafted in 1999, he faded quietly into basketball obscurity. But that's only half the story. What happened off the court was far more damaging. After his playing career ended, Earl became entangled in one of the NCAA's most controversial cases, one that ultimately led to sanctions against LSU and cast a long shadow over Coach Dale Brown's legacy. Earl, desperate to continue playing, told the NCAA what they wanted to hear, that he had accepted money from LSU boosters. But years later, he'd recant his story, claiming that the NCAA pressured him into making those statements, turning a young man with broken dreams into a scapegoat for a system built to protect everyone but the players. The damage had already been done. LSU paid the price, Dale Brown's reputation took a hit, and Lester Earl, he was discarded, forgotten, and left with nothing but the lingering question, what if? His story isn't just about an injury or a bad decision. It's about being caught between two institutions where power trumps fairness and young athletes are disposable after they've served their purpose. This is the story of Lester Earl, what could have been, what wasn't, and the controversy that followed him long after the buzzer sounded. What happened? Let's talk about it. It's your boy JC Stunted Growth. Let's get it, man. Take a minute to like, subscribe, and comment on who I should do next. Lester Earl was a 6'8" forward from Baton Rouge, Louisiana with insane athleticism, shot-blocking instincts, and the kind of highlight reel potential that made him one of the most sought-after recruits in the country. Coming out of Glen Oaks High School, Earl was the dominant force, earning a spot in the prestigious 1996 McDonald's All-American game alongside future NBA stars like Kobe Bryant and Jermaine O'Neal. Ranked as a top 20 prospect nationally, he chose to stay home and play for LSU, where he was expected to follow in the footsteps of Shaquille O'Neal and lead the Tigers back to national relevance. But that dream would soon unravel. A serious knee injury after just 11 games ended his freshman season prematurely. Frustrated and looking for a fresh start, Earl transferred to Kansas, but by then, the magic that once made him a can't-miss prospect was already fading. Stunt number 1, injuries and lost athleticism.
Told you guys what you wanted to hear, and what else do you want to know?
Lester Earl's decline began where so many promising careers have ended, in the trainer's room. After just 11 games into his freshman season at LSU, Earl suffered a significant injury that would derail everything that had been projected for his future. At the time of his injury, he was still adjusting to the college game, averaging 6.2 points and 4.6 rebounds per game, but flashes of his athletic dominance were still there. That explosiveness that made him a force above the rim in high school was evident in his shot blocking and transition play, but once the injury took hold, that part of his game was never the same. Knee injuries are brutal for any athlete, but for someone whose game depended so heavily on athleticism, it was devastating. Earl's injury required significant rehab time, and although he returned to the court, his burst, agility, and quick first step had diminished. By the time he transferred to KU after his freshman season, he was no longer the player who had been compared to the likes of a young Shawn Kemp. The injury not only took a toll on his body, but also his confidence, and that mental hurdle proved just as difficult to overcome. When he finally took the court for Kansas after sitting out a season due to NCAA transfer rules, Earl's game looked unrecognizable. His minutes were limited and his production reflected that. Over 2 seasons at Kansas, he averaged just 3.4 points and 2.4 rebounds per game, a stark contrast to the star LSU and Kansas had envisioned. The once high-flying forward had been reduced to a role player, and for a player who had been expected to dominate, that role was never going to be enough. The injury had robbed him of the one thing that made him special, and there was no getting it back. Stunt number 2, transfer turmoil and role reduction.
If we can't find any wrongdoings from LSU, then you will not play. I want to play.
Lester Earl's decision to transfer from LSU to Kansas after his freshman season was supposed to be a fresh start, but it turned out to be another step in the wrong direction. Transferring was rare for high-profile recruits in the 90s, and Earl's move raised eyebrows. It signaled to many that something wasn't right behind the scenes at LSU, especially with a coach as established as Dale Brown. Earl's relationship with Brown had soured, with rumors suggesting the two clashed over playing style, expectations, and the pressure that came with being the next great LSU star. For Earl, transferring seemed like the best option to escape that environment, but it came at a cost. Due to NCAA transfer rules, Earl had to sit out the entire 97-98 season. That year away from the game was critical for a player already trying to regain his confidence after a devastating knee injury. By the time he suited up for Kansas in 1998, he was walking into a situation where his role was already diminished. Kansas was a powerhouse, featuring established stars like Paul Pierce and Raef LaFrentz, both destined for the NBA. There was no room for Earl to grow into the player he was supposed to be, and his game wasn't built to thrive in a limited role. His athleticism was diminished, and his confidence followed. A far cry from the dominant force he was supposed to become. His minutes were inconsistent, his impact was minimal, and the expectations that once followed him had faded. Transferring was meant to give Earl a second chance, but instead it pushed him further into obscurity. By the time his college career ended, Earl was no longer a star, he was just another forgotten name.
I basically just told them the little small things that occurred, which I think was nothing.
Stunt number 3, NCAA scandal and the price of cooperation. If Lester Earl's basketball career wasn't already derailed by injury and a transfer gone wrong, his involvement in an NCAA scandal ensured that he'd never recover. After his time at Kansas ended and his NBA dreams slipped away, Earl found himself entangled in one of the most controversial NCAA cases of the 90s, a case that would damage the reputation of LSU and Coach Dale Brown while leaving Earl's own name tarnished in the process. In 2001, 2 years after his college career ended, Earl admitted that he had received illegal benefits from an LSU booster during his time with the Tigers. His testimony was the smoking gun the NCAA needed to sanction LSU and tarnish Dale Brown's reputation, with the program being placed on probation and losing scholarships. But years later, Earl dropped a bombshell. He recanted his testimony, claiming the NCAA had pressured him into saying what they wanted to hear. According to Earl, the NCAA manipulated and coerced him by dangling the possibility of reinstatement and future playing opportunities. Earl, desperate to continue his basketball career, said what was expected of him. But by the time the truth came out, it was too late. The damage was done, LSU paid the price, Dale Brown's reputation took a hit, and Earl was cast aside, discarded once the NCAA could no longer use him. What makes this situation even more tragic is that Earl's role was never one of power. He was a pawn in a larger game where the NCAA needed a scapegoat to justify its enforcement actions. When he was no longer useful, they threw him away and he was left to live with the consequences of a decision he didn't fully control. His career was over, his reputation was shattered, and his name is only remembered when NCAA corruption was discussed, never the player he was supposed to be. All in all, after the scandal and the end of his basketball career, Lester Earl disappeared from the public eye. With no shot at the NBA and his reputation damaged beyond repair, there was no redemption arc waiting for him. Unlike other athletes who found second careers in coaching or broadcasting, Earl had no such path. He quietly faded away, resurfacing only occasionally when discussions of NCAA corruption brought his name back into the spotlight. For someone once destined for greatness, Earl's story ended with no triumph, but with silence. He became another cautionary tale of how quickly the system moves on, leaving behind young athletes who were promised the world but given nothing when the lights went out. Salute, much respect, but for these reasons, his growth was stunted. It's your boy JC, Stunted Growth, and I'm out.
I have nothing to say about the NCAA.